Hi there. You're listening to English Podcast for Beginners, your friendly guide to learning English step by step. Let's learn, practice, and grow together.
Welcome back to the deep dive.
It's good to be here.
So this is the show where we take that stack of sources, the one you've been meaning to get to.
Maybe the one you didn't even know you needed.
Exactly. And we extract every single nugget of useful insight. And today we're doing something a little different. We are not dissecting a market trend. We're not looking at some obscure historical event. We're diving into something incredibly personal.
And for millions of people, intensely challenging.
Right. We're talking about the psychology of speaking a second language, specifically English.
That's right. We've got our hands on some excerpts from a really insightful English learning resource. It's titled, How to Build an English-Speaking Personality.
Okay, that title alone is fascinating.
It is. And our mission here is synthesis, a high-level synthesis. We are not going to be talking about verb conjugation, not today.
No vocabulary lists.
No. Instead, we're looking at the core psychological framework that this material presents. We're trying to pull out the advice on building confidence, on finding a natural rhythm, and really outlining the mental shifts you need to make.
The shifts to what? To integrate a new language into who you already are.
Exactly, without feeling like you're wearing a mask.
Okay, let's unpack that right there, because if you are a serious learner of really any second language, you know this feeling.
Oh, you know it intimately.
You study the vocabulary, you get the grammar rules, you might even be able to write these, complex, beautiful paragraphs. But then it's time to speak, and you freeze. There's this wall.
A mental block. It's intense.
It is, and you feel like the full person you are, the witty, nuanced, passionate person you are in your own language, shrinks.
It shrinks into this, cautious, hesitant, smaller version of yourself.
Yes, when you have to use English.
And that's exactly what these sources capture so perfectly. They highlight this universal aha moment, which is really the launch pad for this entire deep dive.
What's the aha moment?
It's the feeling so many learners have that, and this is a direct quote, when they speak English, they are not themselves.
Wow. That's it. That is the friction we are here to analyze.
It is. It signifies this profound disconnect between your established identity, which is vibrant and expressive in your first language, and this limited, cautious, almost robotic persona you feel forced into.
So our job is to find the specific actionable strategies from this source material.
The psychological ones.
Yeah.
The ones that help you bridge that gap and get rid of that feeling of, awkward detachment.
So it sounds like we're moving the focus away from just, say, linguistic acquisition and more towards psychological performance. Our goal is to extract the wisdom that lets you access your full self, your whole personality, but through the vehicle of English.
Precisely. This isn't just about fluency.
It's about authenticity.
Exactly. It's about being you.
Okay, so let's start where the source material starts, with the diagnosis of the problem. Section 1, the learner's dilemma. The sources are very direct here. They observe that people feel shy, nervous, or unsure, even when they demonstrably know the words.
And that's the key, right? They have the knowledge. It's in there. You've memorized the vocabulary. You understand the rules as facts. That's what we call declarative knowledge.
Okay, so what's missing?
What's missing is the procedural knowledge, the confidence and the ease to actually use it in a real-time conversation.
Which is a classic cognitive block. It's about cognitive load, isn't it?
It is entirely about cognitive load. When you're trying to speak, your brain is doing so many things at once. You're translating in your head. You're trying to monitor the grammar rules. You're searching for the right word. You're managing your pronunciation.
All at the same time.
All at the same time. That massive mental overhead leaves, virtually no bandwidth left for your actual personality.
For the fun stuff, the timing, the humor, the emotion.
Exactly. So the lack of confidence isn't a sign that you don't know the language. It's a sign that your system just isn't running on autopilot yet.
And the material gives, I think, a huge piece of comfort right at the beginning. It stresses that this feeling, this difficulty in self-consciousness, is completely normal.
And that is so important, that normalization is foundational.
Why is that step so crucial? Just telling someone it's normal.
Because if you believe this struggle is unique to you, what happens? You internalize it as a personal failure.
I'm just not good at languages.
Exactly. Something is wrong with me. But by defining it as a universal expected stage of learning, the source reframes the entire experience.
It's not a personal failing anymore.
No, it becomes a shared and, more importantly, a solvable challenge. The anxiety comes from the gap between the complex, nuanced ideas you have in your head, your true self, and the simplified, maybe error-prone words you feel limited to in the moment.
So the immediate relief is just knowing that the awkwardness isn't some kind of character flaw.
Not at all. It's just a temporary byproduct of your brain learning to juggle, 5 things at once.
Okay, so once you've accepted that, the source moves on to defining the goal. It clarifies what building an English-speaking personality actually means.
And this is where we get to the critical distinction, the absolute centerpiece of the philosophy here.
It is.
The sources state very explicitly that it does not mean changing who you are.
Okay, let's spend some time on that because that's huge. I think a lot of learners fall into that trap.
They do. Consciously or unconsciously, they believe they have to adopt a whole new persona. Maybe they need to be louder or more outgoing or...
More like the characters they see in American movies or something.
Right, to fit some perceived cultural mold of the new language. But that's just assimilation. And the sources reject it because it's ultimately damaging to your authenticity.
And it must be exhausting, trying to maintain a false front.
It's exhausting, and it feels fake. It adds even more cognitive load.
So if it doesn't mean changing who you are, what does it mean? The material says the goal is to learn how to express your real personality through English. How do you separate those two things for a learner? Assimilation versus expression. What's the practical difference?
It's about where the focus is. Assimilation is external. Expression is internal.
Okay, explain that.
If I'm trying to assimilate, I might try to force a perfect American-sounding accent, maybe use some slang I don't really get, all in the hope of passing as a different kind of person.
Which feels fake, as you said.
It does. But integration or expression is about mapping the feelings and thoughts and the complex structures that already define who I am.
My sense of humor, my sarcasm, my empathy.
Exactly. All of that. And mapping it onto the available English structures.
So let's take an example. If I'm a naturally measured, analytical person in my own language, a bit reserved,
Right.
the goal isn't for me to suddenly become this boisterous storyteller in English.
Not at all. The goal is for you to find the precise English vocabulary, the sentence structures, the tone.
Maybe using certain modal verbs or rhetorical devices.
Exactly. To convey that measured analytical self accurately. The language becomes a vehicle. It's a tool, which we'll get to later. It's not a replacement for your core identity.
The struggle then is finding the right verbal and tonal mechanisms in English to show the exact nuances of the person you already are.
Yes. If your native language lets you show dry wit with a subtle word inversion, the process is about discovering the English equivalent.
Which might be a perfectly timed pause.
Or a specific kind of understatement. That shift changes everything. You stop trying to be like a native speaker and you start making the language serve you.
And that fine-tuning, that process, it takes time.
Which brings us to the next point in the sources framework, the process of growth, practice, and patience.
It has to take time. It has to be messy even.
Why messy?
Because it involves building procedural memory. You're not just memorizing facts anymore. You're physically creating new neural pathways for speech production, and that requires repetition. It requires trial and error. And the source material has a fantastic analogy for this.
It's a great one. Learning to ride a bicycle.
When you first try, you have those initial falls. In language, a fall is making a mistake, stumbling over a word, getting the grammar wrong.
And those falls, the mistakes, they're not the end of the journey. The sources are so clear about this. They are necessary steps toward learning balance.
So what is balance in a linguistic sense? What does that feel like?
Balance is automaticity. Think about the bike again. At first, you have to consciously think about everything. Steering, pedaling, leaning.
High cognitive load.
Extremely high. Right. But once you find your balance, all those little mechanical things become automatic. They become unconscious, procedural.
So in language, automaticity would be when basic sentence construction, common phrases, grammar, it all just happens without you having to consciously think about it.
Yes. And once that mechanical load is reduced, the writer or the speaker is finally free.
Free to look around, notice the scenery.
And critically, free to express their personality. That's a perfect parallel. It's the moment the speaker stops translating in their head and starts thinking in English.
That reduction in friction lets the natural flow of thought just emerge.
And the source material promises that the outcome of this consistent practice is profound. The more you use English, the more natural it feels.
And, crucially, the more confident you become.
It's a self-reinforcing feedback loop. The initial discomfort leads to practice. The practice reduces the conscious strain. The reduced strain allows your natural rhythm to come out. And that feeling reinforces the idea that, yes, this language can actually carry my true personality.
The initial falling gives way to just writing without thinking about the pedals.
That's the linguistic freedom we're all aiming for, a freedom that's rooted in subconscious procedural fluency.
Okay, but the successful integration, this journey, it's impossible if we don't tackle the elephant in the room. Fear. The absolute dread of opening your mouth and sounding foolish. It's the biggest psychological wall. So let's look at how the sources suggest we reframe failure as fuel.
The fundamental block, according to the sources, is that learners stop themselves because they are afraid of saying something wrong.
The fear of judgment.
It's paralyzing.
Yeah.
From a psychological perspective, when we're afraid of being judged, the amygdala fires up. It triggers a flight or freeze response.
And in language learning, that means you freeze up, you say as little as possible, you stick to the simple, safe sentences you know you can't get wrong.
Right, and you're diverting all these cognitive resources away from creative expression and towards just hypervigilant editing.
You're trying to generate a thought, build a sentence, remember the past perfect tense rule, monitor your pronunciation, and gauge how the other person is reacting.
All at once. It's impossible.
So what's the antidote that the source material offers?
It's a powerful and direct reframe, a way to change your entire relationship with making mistakes.
Which is
Mistakes are not a sign of failure. They are defined, simply and powerfully, as a sign that you are learning.
that one shift changes the entire context of the act of speaking.
It really does. If I see an error as proof that I'm failing or that I'm not smart enough, my motivation just collapses. I stop.
But if I see that error as evidence that I'm actively engaged in the process of learning,
Then the incentive is to keep going, to generate more data for your brain. It transforms speaking from a performance being judged into a personal experiment.
and the material goes beyond just, positive thinking. It gives a mechanical benefit to back this up.
It does. It specifies that every mistake helps your brain understand English better. And this is just core cognitive science.
Also.
When you make a grammatical mistake, your brain gets an error signal. Maybe this listener looks confused, or you just hear it yourself and it sounds wrong. That error signal is critical feedback.
It tells your neural networks, okay, that hypothesis was wrong.
Precisely. And so the next attempt, the correct phrasing, is reinforced. It's strengthened because it's responding to a real, felt need. Without that cycle of testing and getting feedback, the pathways just don't get strong.
So we can synthesize this profound psychological difference. You're moving from seeing errors as personal flaws
That take away from your self-worth.
to seeing them as necessary data points for neural growth. They're literally stepping stones.
The pressure is still there, but it's been reassigned. It's no longer the pressure to be perfect,
It's the pressure to generate enough mistakes to learn.
which reassigns all that energy from paralysis into proactivity. And this leads us directly to the second big point in this section.
The primacy of communication over perfection.
Yes, if mistakes are fuel, then the only real failure is when you stop communicating altogether.
And the sources are so clear on the practical way to measure success. The directive is focus on communication, not perfection. Forget the obsession with flawless grammar.
Yes. And the litmus test they provide is it's so beautifully simple and actionable.
What is it?
The speaker should just ask themselves one question. Can people understand me?
And if the answer to that fundamental question is yes,
Then the source says the learner is doing well.
that is a massive reassurance. The standard isn't elegance, it's effectiveness. You don't have to be perfect, you just have to be understood.
Whether you're ordering a coffee or leading a business meeting. And that core insight, clear communication is more important than perfect grammar, is the practical engine that builds confidence.
Think about the energy you save.
So much energy. If you are communicating clearly, you've successfully used the language as a tool to get your objective. The grammatical error is secondary. It didn't stop the main goal.
This mindset immediately lowers the pressure because the goalposts move from something impossible, like flawless native speech.
To something achievable, which is the successful transfer of meaning.
Let's use an example. Say a learner wants to talk about a past event, and they mix up the simple past and present perfect.
A very common mistake.
They say, I gone to the store yesterday and bought milk. The grammar is wrong.
But the communication is 100% successful. You understand the action, the object, the timing, everything.
The communicative burden is low.
Exactly. Now imagine that same learner pausing for 30 seconds, stuck in their head, debating went versus have gone versus had gone.
And then they just give up because it's too risky. They say nothing.
In that case, they prioritize perfection, and they failed the communication objective.
Yeah.
By prioritizing clarity, the first learner maintains fluency. They keep the conversation moving.
And that prioritization, that focus on clarity over flawlessness, that's what unlocks the authentic personality.
It has to be. Because when you're not spending 80% of your brain power on tense selection.
That 80% is now free for things like tone and timing and wit, the actual mechanisms of personality.
It's the difference between driving a car to get to a destination and constantly pulling over to see if the paint is perfectly polished.
The goal is the destination,
Yeah.
communication.
The superficial flaw, perfection, is secondary. And when you really internalize that, it changes how you absorb the language in the first place.
Which leads us perfectly into the next section. We have to talk about the input side of this equation. The sources make a very strong case for listening as a tool for expression, not just for, picking up new words.
We have to redefine what we think of as listening practice. It's not just a dictation exercise.
Right.
The source material really dives into this idea that exposure to authentic language, podcasts, movies, real conversations, is how you understand how people express things.
Emotions, opinions, complex ideas.
Yes. This is the crucial mapping mechanism we talked about where your existing personality gets translated into English.
Because the words themselves are often emotionally neutral. It's how we use them that matters.
Absolutely. The sources identify 3 key elements you absorb through listening that are vital for this personality transfer: tone, rhythm, and common expressions.
Okay, let's focus on those first 2 for a second. Tone and rhythm. Why are these non-lexical, non-word elements so vital for showing your true personality?
Because they carry what linguists call prosody.
The music of the language.
The music of the language. Sarcasm, warmth, impatience, deference. Those feelings are not in the dictionary definition of the words. They are carried entirely in the melody, the pitch, the volume, and the timing of your speech.
Okay, but let me challenge that a little. Isn't vocabulary still the primary driver? If I want to convey skepticism, I need to know words like doubtful or unconvinced.
That's a valid point, but here's where the nuance comes in. Vocabulary gives you the content of the skepticism, but prosody gives you the intent.
Okay.
You could use the simplest English words.
Oh, right?
Really? Are you sure? But if you deliver that phrase with a flat, slightly lower pitch and a deliberate pause.
It's dripping with skepticism.
Deeply skeptical. Regardless of the simple vocabulary, a learner who only focuses on words, even advanced ones, but speaks with a halting, monotone rhythm, their enthusiastic personality is going to come across as bored or awkward.
I see. So the source is arguing that to feel relaxed, you have to be able to convey your emotional truth. And that means you have to absorb the native flow, the music of the language.
It's the difference between reading sheet music and hearing a song performed by a master musician. The notes are the same, but the rhythm and dynamics give it life. They give it personality.
And active listening lets you start picking up on those dynamics, which leads to the next actionable step from the material.
The strategy of selective imitation.
It feels like a powerful shift. You're not just passively listening anymore, you're actively curating. The sources advise learners to try to copy the style you like.
It gives so much agency back to the learner. I think many students feel like they have to mimic the first native speaker they meet or the voice actor in their textbook.
Which can feel really inauthentic. Like you're putting on a performance that just doesn't fit who you are.
It doesn't. The source material recognizes that style is subjective. It encourages you to assess different styles: calm, energetic, formal, colloquial, and build a personalized toolkit from what you hear.
They give clear examples. If you like calm speakers, listen to calm English. If you like energetic speakers, listen to energetic voices. But let's challenge this idea of imitation for a moment. Isn't there a risk that by copying someone else, the learner feels even more fake?
That's a legitimate concern, but the key word here is selective imitation. This is not about adopting a whole new personality.
It's about borrowing individual components.
Exactly. You might hear a speaker who uses timing in a specific way for comic effect, or a certain intonation pattern that makes them sound formal but not harsh. You're curating, you're not cloning.
So the imitation is like a temporary scaffold.
It is. The learner tries on the style to see if it efficiently conveys their own internal feelings. If it fits, you integrate it. If it doesn't, you just discard it.
So if I'm naturally a calm person, and I hear a speaker who uses a lot of rhetorical questions and a soft voice to make their points. I can borrow that structural technique without changing my core personality. I'm just adding a new tool to my toolbox.
A new tool that allows you to express your existing calm personality more effectively.
And the long-term result of this, according to the sources,
The sources promise that this active practice of curated borrowing leads you to naturally creating your own style in English over time.
how does that happen?
The borrowed elements start to click together. They get modified by your own natural pace, your own accent, and eventually they form a genuinely personalized, authentic linguistic structure.
So you move from borrowing tools to owning the whole toolbox.
Configured exactly to your specifications. And it moves you, the learner, from being a passive student to being an active style architect, which is a much more powerful and confidence-boosting role to be in.
It makes language learning a creative act.
Not just a memorization task.
Okay, so we've moved from the high-level psychological work and the style curation. Let's get into the tangible, practical habits.
The day-to-day stuff.
Yes. The sources spend a good amount of time emphasizing the power of small daily habits. The focus is on consistency over intensity.
Which is so important for preventing burnout. This section is critical because it democratizes fluency. It gets rid of the idea that you have to block out 2 intensive hours a day to study.
The source says confidence comes from these small daily habits, not necessarily hours of study, and they give a really reassuring metric.
Even 5 or 10 minutes can help. The goal is frequency, not duration.
What's the cognitive benefit of that? Why is frequency more important?
It keeps the neural pathways active, even if the session is short. It stops your brain from treating English as something you only do under pressure, like in a classroom. It makes it part of the fabric of your daily life.
And the source material details some specific low-pressure practice methods that you can use immediately.
And crucially, they're all internal exercises. They're designed to bypass the greatest fear we talked about, the fear of external judgment.
Okay, let's break down the 3 methods they list because they each have a slightly different cognitive benefit. Number 1, talking to yourself in English.
This is the purest form of stress-free language production. When there's no audience, the pressure to self-monitor your grammar, your pronunciation, your social appropriateness, it just drops to 0.
So your brain is free to just practice?
It's free to practice retrieving words and constructing sentences. This repetitive internal monologue accelerates that move toward automaticity because you're doing it rapidly, testing things out without any fear of consequence. It's like a neurological sandbox.
Okay, method number 2, describing your day out loud. How is that different from just talking to yourself?
It adds structure and a concrete connection to the physical world around you. When you're narrating an immediate action, I am pouring the coffee now, I need to stir it, the milk is cold, you force your brain to connect physical objects and actions directly to English vocabulary.
Without that intermediate step of translating from your first language.
Exactly. It's a mechanism for bypassing that cognitive barrier. And on top of that, it practices narrative skills. Sequencing. Telling a story chronologically, which is a foundational skill for any natural conversation.
That's a subtle but really important difference. You're forced to use descriptive verbs, temporal connectors like first, then afterward. That improves your narrative flow.
Which is crucial for an authentic conversational style.
And the 3rd habit, sharing your thoughts out loud.
This is the highest level of the 3 internal practices. Sharing thoughts means expressing opinions, judgments, abstract concepts, emotional states.
I think the current political climate is complicated. Or, I feel frustrated by this traffic.
Yes. These activities require more complex, abstract vocabulary. They often require you to use more complex sentence structures, hypotheticals, comparisons, conditional glosses.
So practicing this gets your brain ready for the deeper conversations.
It moves you beyond simple, concrete descriptions and into the realm of complex self-expression. It prepares you to convey your full intellectual and emotional self when you're under real pressure.
So these 3 habits, they work together like a progressive training regime. Talking to yourself for fluency, describing your day for structure, and sharing your thoughts for complexity.
All done without external evaluation.
Yeah.
And they help the brain, as the source says, think in English without pressure. It's the rehearsal that makes the public performance feel so much less strained.
Which leads directly to the final strategy for intercognition, connecting English to real life. The directive here is simple: connect English with your real life and talk about topics you actually care about.
This strategy is vital. It links the language to your intrinsic motivation. So many learners get stuck in textbook scenarios. The conversation at the train station, which has zero emotional resonance.
They're boring.
They're boring. But when you are discussing something you care deeply about, a hobby, a passion, a political opinion you hold strongly, your personality is naturally engaged. You're automatically more enthusiastic, more nuanced, more detailed.
The sources observe that when you're speaking about things you enjoy, your personality comes out more easily, even in the second language.
It does.
Let's dig into the mechanics of that. How does linking the language to your interests bypass that analytical pressure we talked about?
It's a wonderful example of how importance just overrides mechanics. Your brain has limited bandwidth, right?
Right.
So when you are excited about the content, say, you're explaining the highly specific mechanics of your favorite video game or the history of a niche scientific field you love, your brain prioritizes delivering that complex, detailed meaning.
Crowds out the fear.
Exactly. The sheer importance and complexity of the idea overrides the immediate impulse to analyze the grammar of the sentence.
So if your brain has 100 units of cognitive load,
When you're talking about a passion, maybe 90 of those units are dedicated to retrieving the technical information and showing your enthusiasm. That only leaves 10 units for grammar editing.
whereas with a boring textbook topic,
Maybe 50 units are spent just worrying about grammar because the content isn't important enough to distract your internal editor.
so this spontaneous, authentic expression driven by passion is exactly what you need to feel like yourself in English.
The language is just pressed into service to communicate that passion, which makes the whole act of speaking feel more natural and less like a performance.
It's not just about what you talk about, it's about accessing the drive you already have in your native language, the passion, the engagement, and using that energy to power your output in your second language.
It forces authenticity by making the subject matter more important than the linguistic flaws.
Okay, so we've broken down the diagnosis, the fear barrier, the practical habits. Let's look at the ultimate destination, the end goal, as presented by the sources.
Section 5. Sounding like yourself. This is where the material grants the final, crucial permission slip that every language learner needs.
What's the permission slip?
It's the necessary counter-narrative to decades of language learning methodology that focus purely on achieving a standardized, native-like output. The sources strongly reaffirm that the English-speaking personality does not need to sound like a native speaker.
The bar is set differently and much more realistically. The English-speaking personality just needs to sound like you.
That is the ultimate validation of the individual's journey. It's a rejection of linguistic conformity.
And the source material explicitly names the components of this unique identity, the parts that should be valued, not corrected or erased.
It says your accent, your style, and your pace are all part of your identity. This is a huge shift.
So instead of treating your accent as a flaw to be reduced,
You treat it as a marker of your unique background and your experience.
I think the point about pace is especially important. So often, learners feel this pressure to speed up their speech to match some rapid-fire native pace. But if you're a naturally reflective, slow-paced thinker, trying to talk quickly it's physically exhausting, and it dramatically increases your errors because you're skipping the cognitive steps your brain needs.
Absolutely. Your pace reflects your natural rhythm of thought. If you're a thoughtful person who takes time to formulate precise statements, trying to get rid of that natural rhythm is like trying to get rid of part of yourself.
The sources are telling us those differences are assets.
They are. Accepting and valuing those characteristics, your pace, your accent, your curated style, is the key to feeling natural and relaxed. If the goal is internal comfort and confidence, then struggling against your natural inclinations it's profoundly counterproductive.
By accepting the components of your own unique voice, you reduce resistance.
And you unlock fluency. The focus shifts entirely from external judgment to internal congruence.
Which feeds into this powerful metaphor the sources use to summarize the role of language.
This might be the most elegant piece of psychological framing in the whole resource.
The tool, not the test.
English is a tool, not a test. This is a metaphor that every learner should just internalize. Repeat it daily.
Let's elaborate on the psychological implications there, the contrast. If you see English as a test,
Then every single thing you say is subject to a grade. It's a potential source of failure, a cause for extreme anxiety. You analyze, you freeze, you focus on the judgment.
a state that leads to silence.
But if English is a tool, well, what do you do with the tool? You use it, practically, to achieve your goals.
Tools can be scratched or messy, they might need sharpening, But their value is measured purely by their effectiveness.
Exactly. The implication is profound. Focus on application over analysis. Did the tool successfully convey my meaning? Yes. Then it was successful. That kind of psychological shift promotes proactive communication. It radically reduces that impulse to self-censor.
It takes the burden of proof off of the speaker's flawless performance and puts the emphasis back on the original objective, communication.
It makes the language servant to the speaker, not the other way around. You pick up the tool, the English language, and you use to build whatever you need to build in that moment.
And that freedom, that shift, clears the mental space for the final essential element of the source material.
The final call for self-kindness. The emotional guidance that really wraps all this advice up.
The sources are, at their core, realistic. They define language learning as a long journey, which acknowledges the effort, the time, the inevitable setbacks. And the guidance is so simple but so essential. Be kind to yourself, and remember, every step matters.
Kindness reduces the intensity of that internal critic we've been talking about. If you're kind to yourself, a mistake is just an error in execution, a misstep on a long road. It's not a personal failing that proves you're incapable.
That generosity of spirit allows you to relax.
And if you accept that the journey is long, you stop demanding perfection from yourself today.
And the final payoff is the ultimate takeaway for natural expression. It ties this whole deep dive together.
The more relaxed you are, the more natural your English will become.
So naturalness isn't achieved through perfect grammar.
It's achieved through psychological comfort. By reframing mistakes as necessary data, by prioritizing communication, by curating a style you enjoy, and by practicing daily without pressure, you're just setting the stage for your existing personality to flow seamlessly into the new language.
You're removing the obstacles, the fear, and the cognitive overload.
So your authentic self can finally drive the conversation.
So this deep dive into how to build an English-speaking personality has been a pretty exhaustive look at the psychological mechanics of fluency and authenticity. Our major takeaways, I think, are really clear and transformative. First, mistakes are necessary learning opportunities.
Not failures.
We have to focus rigorously on clear communication over grammatical perfection.
And confidence isn't some gift you're born with. It's built methodically through small, consistent, low-pressure habits.
Right. The source material is really a testament to the idea that this linguistic journey has to prioritize self-belief and acceptance.
We've synthesized how internalizing that idea of English as a tool
Rather than a test.
frees up so much mental space. It allows your unique style, your accent, your pace to become defining features, not sources of anxiety.
The confidence doesn't come from sounding like someone else.
It comes from being authentically you, just in a different language.
So let's leave you with an actionable final thought, something that builds directly on the source's emphasis on daily consistency and low-pressure practice.
Okay.
Given that even 5 or 10 minutes can help your brain think in English without pressure, we want you to choose one specific, non-judgmental, low-pressure task, something you can integrate into your schedule today. Will you spend 5 minutes describing your coffee order out loud? Or narrating your walk to your car? Maybe explaining the plot of your favorite film to yourself in the mirror?
Something small.
Pick that single low-stakes moment and just talk. Practice being you in English at your own pace with your own style.
Take that moment to find your voice, unburdened by the fear of perfection.
And we'll catch you next time on The Deep Dive.